Hi, everybody. Here's the Hollywood Progressive Team back with you again. We saw really a fabulous play this weekend called The Bluest Eye. It plays at Pasadena's A Noise Within until September 27th. This powerful play is based on Toni Morrison's 1970 debut novel by the same name. It's adapted by Lydia R. Chapman and directed by Andy Chapman. It's set in Ohio in the 1940s. It tells the story of three young Black girls who try to deal with the poisonous effects of racism and shame thrust upon them in a largely white town. One of them, Percola Breedlove, blames her especially dark skin for her plight. If only she had blue eyes, she imagines, people would love and respect her. What'd you think, hon?
Toni Morrison, of course, is an iconic um, fiction writer. Some call her writing poetry, and particularly in the Black community, she's really revered and revered by me, even though I have often said, continue to say, I don't care for fiction, but I do admire and um, hold up high Toni Morrison's ability to take the plight of African Americans and to frame our lives in ways that have been digested by larger portions of society. When I was thinking about what to say today, I was I remembered an interview of Toni Morrison with Charlie Rose, who asked Toni Morrison if she would ever consider writing about white people. And her response, and I'm hoping that you can cut in, or I can cut in a little bit of her response to Charlie Rose, because I didn't even want to try to quote her. It was just so perfect. So, what Toni Morrison does is lay before America what Black life is like. And The Bluest Eye is her first novel. And just even knowing the name of the novel when I was younger, when it came out 50 years ago, it was like I already knew what it was about. And it's about beauty standards. And being a Black young woman at the time that this novel was published, I was highly impacted by beauty standards. I was a teenager, born and raised in New York City. Um, I am not ambiguously Black. I am Black, but not dark skin Black, not light skin Black, and all of those things make a difference. And beauty standards certainly make a difference in this country, make a difference in almost every aspect of your life. So I think the book itself conveys how impactful beauty standards are, especially if you are belong to a group whose beauty does not meet the standards that were established by Europeans. As far as this book being made into a play, I'd say that there was some difficulty for me, particularly in the language, the way that the play switches back and forth between being narrated and being acted. That was not, it would not be something that I would choose. Um, but overall, I think that the play was powerful. I do have one final critique, and that is that we saw this play at a venue that I would say it looked like maybe 85 to 90% of the audience was white. And I felt uncomfortable sitting with white people, as what came across to me was the sharing of an intimate reality of Black life, um, almost presented as spectacle. So, would I go see it again? Yes, but with that in mind. So that's my take on it.
What you got, Nia?
I really enjoyed this play. I had not heard of Toni Morrison before this. I am planning on buying a couple of her books and reading them now that I have seen this one. I think it's interesting when Sharon mentioned Morrison being asked if she would ever write a white character, and I don't know what interview she was talking about or what her actual answer is, but just hearing that question posed, I immediately thought, well, she was writing about white people. In at least in this adaptation of this book, The Bluest Eye, um, obviously the characters are black and it's about the black life, but it's about how the black life is impacted by white people and the standards that they set. So I thought that that was interesting of how, she is inadvertently writing about white people, but without saying explicitly she's writing about white people. And what I enjoyed about this was how it just kind of, like Sharon said, this felt intimate. This felt like the personal experience certainly any person of color has experienced, certainly within the United States, but particularly Black people. It felt very personal, almost private, of like, should we be sharing such a vulnerable part of ourselves and show how much internal harm uh, racism and white supremacy and all of those things, puts on every person of color and Black people in particular. Something I really enjoyed about this play was how she showed the generational trauma, like how she showed how each person, is their own bubble of experiences, good and bad. And it showed how the parents of this young girl, Piccola, who the play and the story is centered around, how, the paths that sort of led her parents to where they are now, and how the traumas, the very different kinds of traumas, but all under the blanket of racism, affected them personally, which caused, how they affected themselves and eventually their daughter. I thought this was a pretty well done play. Technically, I agree with Sharon. There could have been some better delineation between the narration portions and the acting portions, because two of the actors who were part of the actual story would sort of not even step aside, but they would sort of step outside of the story to narrate and break the fourth wall and interact with the audience directly, which in and of itself was really powerful. I think that's exactly how it should be done. I felt very much a part of the story and carried along through sort of piece by piece, level by level, decoding and experiencing the racism and expectations that these three young girls were privy to, already experiencing. And they were probably meant to be no older than 10, certainly, very young girls, and they already knew about, that there was a difference between the cute little white girl with the golden curls and the blue eyes and them. They knew that they were different, and it was sort of, you were on this journey with them of not even them being exposed to the racism for the first time, but just, oh yeah, just another day of, okay, gotta keep my head down, yep, this expectation is on me and I'm not meeting it, so they're not going to look at me, I'm going to be invisible. And it made me really really feel for these little girls, certainly. And there was a lot of sniffles and tears in the audience, which I hope was because I hope it was because they were actually feeling the unfairness and the weight that was being put on these young girls' shoulders, and not just the tragedy that was sort of uh, the focal point of Piccola's life. Because this play was also sort of, I think you could argue sort of a take on mental health as well, and a look at how tragedy exacerbates mental health and can cause someone to just completely break psychologically. So I hope that they were seeing more than just that surface level, and were understanding some of the facial expressions. The director did a really good job of having so the two girls that were narrating were very much aware of the realities of things being said and sentences, this little comments about some little girl's hair, things like that, and the narrators were sort of like your moral measure throughout the play of like, wait, like what did they just say? Like, let me try and reprocess that. I really enjoyed this play. I would certainly see it again, and I would encourage others to see it again or see it.
Well, as you can hear, both of my partners were really put some deep thought in it. It is a very thought-provoking play as it's intended to be. It's really, in a sense, heavy lifting. I mean, it really talks about some real tragedy. I came to Toni Morrison when she wrote Song of Solomon, 1977. That won some kind of award, and I learned about it and I read it. I was deeply moved by that novel. Highly recommended. It's very lyrically written. The way she writes, it isn't so much the story, but the way she carries people along in that story. And as I do when I really like an author, I've done that since I was a kid. Then I go grab other books they've written, and that's how I came to The Bluest Eye. Back then I was less moved by that writing style. It was her first novel written 10 years earlier, but still also very good. So when we talked about it after the play, we said, the point that Sharon makes, that this was mostly an older white audience, and I fit right in, and my two partners fit in a little less well. And we wondered what it would be like if that play were performed like at the Roby Theater, where we saw a heated discussion, which was entirely Black, except for me and maybe another person. I just wondered, a Black audience would make the deep connection between the dysfunction that goes on in the characters' lives and white supremacy and racism and Jim Crow and slavery. I mean, the play it shows incest, rape, child molestation, and you could connect that to Black people, or you could connect it to white supremacy, which I'm sure the play intends. And a Black audience, as my partners will attest, catch right up on that. But you don't necessarily know if others do. And I think it's tutorial to white people to see that play, to understand things like there's the talk about the white gaze, which I'm sure maybe a lot of white people don't know about, and probably all Black people do, certainly Black people of an age. The white gaze, there's a store owner who sells Percola, the central character who's most damaged, sells her a few pieces of candy, and looks right through her. The girl thinks she must be hideously ugly because he can't even look at her and he won't touch her. And there's other aspects. I mean, the other things that happen. I mean, even the way that the characters, some of the characters behave horribly, you can see is because they're ground down in the racism of this mostly white town in Ohio. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
I don't think that we should make this unnecessarily long, because we want people to watch this review, and also we want people to go to the play. But I was reading critique of the book, and although the book was written 50 years ago, I do want to make the point that what was happening 50 years ago is still happening today. Standards of beauty are still established by people who don't look like me. And there are little girls right now today who are dark skinned, feel ashamed about the color of their skin. And that shame bleeds over, and a shame about their hair. It bleeds over into other areas of their life. The way that a woman, and to maybe to a different degree, men feel about their appearances has an impact in almost every area of their life, and how they perform and how they will act in social settings. So I just wanted to emphasize for people who are unaware of this, that even though this was written 50 years ago, it is as relevant today as it was at the time that it was written.
Additional thoughts, Nia?
This is a powerful play. This is it can be difficult to watch for some, but I think it's important to see, and I think it's important to listen, go deeper than just these, the superficial level of the general story going on, and the actors and the director did a really good job of measuring facial expressions and really good about their timing and listening to each line being delivered so they know how to react properly. And it's yeah, take the time to really analyze this as you watch it and look beyond just the front facing story of it.
So obviously this play is being put on right on time in this area of banning books, Ron DeSantis, and banning books. In fact, The Bluest Eye is off, even though it's a 50-year-old novel, it's oftentimes high on the list of banned books, as is Song of Solomon. And I think partly that is because it makes some very powerful points about racism that need to be made. And I think we all recommend it. And Noise Within is just the most charming theater to go to you can imagine. Talk to you next week. We're seeing another play this weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And did you mention that it is playing at A Noise Within in Pasadena?
I did at the beginning. And
right.
And when we write our review, we will include that video of the interview with Toni Morrison in there. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.